Hello and welcome to the CIO Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator for this session. Throughout today's event, you can win one of several prizes, so please do check out the prizes and raffle rules tab of the interface to see how you can earn points. Also, you can ask questions throughout the session. Simply type into the Q&A chat. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mike Schubert, Vice President of Technology at Unum. We are so excited to have Mike and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Bringing Up AI, Increased Success of Automated Technology with Tactful Planning and Execution of Artificial Intelligence. Welcome, Mike, and over to you.
Thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here moderating this panel today as part of the AI Strategy Summit. We've got great representation from a variety of roles and industries here. They'll hopefully help shape your own thinking and approach to formulating and driving AI at your company. First, we'll do a round of introductions. Again, I'm Mike Schubert. I'm Vice President of Technology at Unum. We're a Fortune 250 insurance provider focused on group disability, life, dental, and voluntary benefits. I'm accountable for claims platforms and consumer-facing digital assets, where we're pushing the forefront of AI application across all of our work streams. Next up, we have Kristen. Kristen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Kristen Bissett. I'm the Chief Actuary, Data and Analytics Officer for QBE North America. QBE is a global insurer headquartered in Sydney, Australia, and with major offices in New York, London, Singapore. We sell primarily P&C products, a variety of those around the world. In the US, really specialty commercial, and our federal crop program would be our biggest products that we sell. My responsibilities include the estimating the liabilities for the North American business, as well as our longer term data and analytics strategy, including the implementation of AI.
Awesome. Welcome, Kristen. Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. So I'm Adam Miko, and I work as a principal data visualization enablement and fluency at Moderna, with a secondary role as a Gen AI user champion leader. So I'm certified in Tableau, AI literacy, Einstein analytics with Salesforce. I'm also an advisory board member with the Data Leadership Collaborative, a published author for a certification book on Tableau, a Golden Hoodie recipient at Dreamforce, a two-time Community Leadership Award winner at Tableau Conference, and a Tableau Visionary Ambassador. I'm also autistic, and I support diversity and inclusion efforts, which includes neurodiversity. So I strive to elevate the data platform for all, and I believe learning and supporting others is a lifelong pursuit.
Awesome. Welcome, Adam. Eduardo, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep, my name is Eduardo Ortiz. I am manager of data privacy and information governance at Carnival Cruise Line, where I oversee risk intelligence and data protection programs across our North America brands. Privacy is perhaps the cornerstone of ethical AI, and it shapes how we use and protect data in a journey toward innovation. So I help lead programs and personnel in that regard. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all. What a great panel. Maybe sticking with Eduardo, if I can throw this first question to you. What are you seeing as the greatest challenge facing leaders today related to AI and automation efforts?
Yeah, I would say, ensuring compliance with, global data protection, privacy regulations, particularly those, in the EU, and, as well as with, developing state legislation that we have here in the US that really mandate, stringent data, processing, protocols. So it's really about balancing that data utilization with privacy and user expectations, especially when dealing with, customer data analytics. Really have to be careful about where we're collecting data and adhere to the minimization principles, so that we don't lead ourselves to perhaps some privacy infringement, and really focus on protecting sensitive data as well, and just understanding that data we use to train learning language models, in some instances, could be biased if we aren't careful in how we're using that data. So that's perhaps, I would say, those three bullets are perhaps the biggest challenge I've seen when it comes to facing AI and automation as a leader.
You touched on a couple of really interesting things there. One, large language models, and certainly the public availability of ChatGPT hitting the marketplace, in the last year. For me, it has had a big impact on my list of challenges, just as one's become more of a fear of missing out, I think, amongst executives. It was where AI was something that was being done in the recesses of IT in corporations and in startups, and now you have this publicly available language model that seems to solve all the ills of generative AI. I don't know, Adam, we were talking about this a little bit earlier in the green room, if you will. How are you seeing challenges evolve facing our leaders today?
100% co-sign with Eduardo's points there, but my biggest concern is with the quality of data. So if you have dark or near dark data that isn't cleaned, cataloged, or certified, you're really leading to results that could be misleading at the very least, or very dangerous, which is most likely when you're working with data that's not well designed or governed. So it's important to make sure that the governance is in place. I see a lot of slogans that start off with Gen AI plus data, but you can't have Gen AI before you have the data. The data is the most important piece. And if your data is not in shape for AI or Gen AI, there's not much value you can get from it. So the most important things that leaders really need to be considering is what's the shape and quality of their data, and could it actually be potentially used for AI before applying it to AI models.
Awesome. Kristen, what are you seeing from your space?
Maybe it's a summary of all the things you guys just said, really, because there's and what I would say, it's pace in delivering business value to me, because there's so much energy. Everybody wants to move very, very fast. But you have these issues with data, with compliance, with the right governance. All of those things need to change in the context of AI a little bit from the way you do them today. And that's all a people process. So how do you set up the right infrastructure? How do you make sure you're working on the right things that are really going to be your big bets where AI can deliver a lot of value, but still do all that work at pace, because it is a great time. You don't want to miss out. Everybody's interested in doing it. How do you take advantage of all that and actually get it moving? So I think it's really a unique challenge, and it's a unique opportunity. And those two things coming together are probably the things that are hardest, right?
For sure. So I guess, thinking about the value equation, the value proposition, and Kristen, if I can stick with you,
Yep.
What are some effective ways where you're seeing leaders, or you personally even have applied AI to get at that AI ROI?
Well, it's kind of funny, because there's some basic ways that people are just doing that. Some of the power of it, right, is that it's available to everybody. So the more sophisticated people are already using it to write their own code. So, their productivity goes up by huge percentages, all those things in terms of just quick wins to advance the work that they do in a much more straightforward way. So I think there's little applications that can make huge differences in just efficiency and get more throughput from organizations that are less risky to implement. And then there are sort of the big bets, like if you want to transform an end-to-end process using AI, I think that's a place where it makes sense to, take your time understanding that the end-to-end process, what has to change in the way that people interact with that process, and how do you actually work through that. So I think when you're coming up with your use cases as an organization, you can crowdsource a lot of that. Some people want to do some really straightforward things, and it's great to really empower those people to do that if you have the environment that keeps it safe. But there's going to be ones where you say, hey, this is a broader concept. We need to have more leadership buy-in, more investment in capabilities, whether it's technology, people, training, whatever those things are, to actually understand the real implications on the business. And so I think as you go through and look at those use case trade-offs, you can apply AI in different ways through that spectrum.
You raise a bunch of great points there, particularly around process, and that's one area where we've seen some great success applying some tools in the marketplace that can look at processes that line level employees are following, to understand, hey, are we following the same process? Are there optimizations that can be done within teams or larger work groups to standardize things? And ultimately getting the process right and getting it standard is one of those things that leads to automation later. Adam, what kind of ROI or innovative ways have you seen to deliver ROI from these tools and technologies?
Good question. When you're looking at legacy models, it's generally a few people that's employing it for a lot of people. So for example, when you're creating, applying machine learning and so forth, only a few people could do it. But the impact of Gen AI is in everybody's pocket if the company enables it. So I could see a huge impact in ROI as far as utilizing Gen AI, depending on what your role is. So if your role involves a lot of communication, outlining, training, and or coding, I could see it about 40% or so increase in productivity. Again, those users that are utilizing it should definitely be experts in their field. And that's one of the prime examples I think that we'll touch on later is, what are the things that you have to be concerned about. But one of the things that could do is really provide an increase in production, be kind of like an assistant for you. So if you know the material, but you just don't want to do the manual legwork of it, you could put in prompts or super prompts in Gen AI in order to make sure that you have something of value for the end user and spend a lot less time on it. The other part of it is that I work for a company that enables AI for all. So basically we encourage all of our employees to be AI literate. So that's a prime example of being able to leverage AI and make sure that people have a baseline of literacy before that they're using it, to understand what the pitfalls are and what the benefits are and how to apply it.
Awesome. Eduardo, any thoughts to add here?
Yeah, similar to Adam, here at Carnival, we recognize, AI as both, an employee support tool, and an increasingly, integrated kind of business process tool, supporting pretty much, most aspects of our business, particularly those, business functions that have high customer touch points. And so, we recognize the potential, and we encourage individual, employee productivity. So employees are encouraged to use, AI tools within our enterprise environment, and of course, in accordance with policy. Somewhat to what Adam mentioned, we also have a group, a council focused on, establishing those privacy and security safeguards and ethical safeguards when it comes to using AI. But and we also recognize, AI in terms of business process enablement. So prior to installing or integrating or implementing the tools, into our environment, we have to go through some oversight processes, but it's all in the spirit of, framing, on the one end, enabling sort of the kind of, the innovative use of these tools, but, framing them in terms of risk. And so, some effective use cases here have been, just implementing some AI-driven protocols, to perhaps detect anomalies, to better understand or indicate whether or not we're experiencing some type of potential data incident or breach. In some cases, utilizing AI for anonymization or securing, data sharing, for example, through some kind of algorithmic use. And then we have a lot of customer support functions. And so where we can apply algorithms to gain customer insights or, just make that customer facing, function more efficient, and we're looking at that as well. But I think that all of it, comes from an attitude of recognition that our employees are going to, use this both professionally and personally. They're going to use it in many ways to, enhance their productivity, and that's a good thing. And we support that. We just want to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible way, and that just comes with education and innovation kind of happening in parallel.
Touched on a lot of great things there, and really we kind of touched on generative AI, all four of us as we were talking through this, and in preparation for today, we talked about Gen AI a lot, and I see questions coming in from the audience. So this is clearly something that is at the front of people's minds in all roles of organizations. What, individually and collectively, what are your thoughts on Gen AI? What cautionary tales or warnings do you have? What challenges do you see, and what uses do you see? Who wants to
I could jump in here. So with Gen AI, there are a ton of challenges because a human has to put the Gen AI product together. They have to put the models together. There's going to be some issues with ethical concerns, potential discrimination issues, and so forth based on the data and based on who's doing it. So the one thing is that when you're working with Gen AI, at least at the current time period, you really need an expert to work with it, meaning that if you're not an expert in that particular field or that particular subject that you're working with in Gen AI. So for example, I'll go back to coding. So if you don't understand how to use Python, you shouldn't be asking it to write code for you and try to put it into practice. That could be very dangerous. So you don't know exactly what you're going to get. Also, the interesting thing is that if you're working with image software like DALL-E or Midjourney, you're going to get not a very good representation of people when you're asking it to create images of people. You're going to get very similar looking people and very beautiful looking people. And it's always going to be the case, quote unquote, beautiful looking people. So it's kind of one of those things that you have to be concerned about. So you have to know what you're doing in order to apply Gen AI. But the great thing about it is I could see the real power of Gen AI being put based on platforms. So when specific platforms are using their tools and having it work with what their tool specific application is, it can be super powerful and make learning hurdles a lot less complex. So for example, if you're working, there's Microsoft Copilot, and there's that's been used quite a bit. So it's been helping a lot of people put stuff together very quickly, correct language, utilizing AI, and do a lot of other things that it would take a lot longer to do. And there's so many other applications out there that are running up new stuff and applying Gen AI, which is super exciting and in beta stage that I'm working with. But it's super exciting to work with and to see what the application will be in the future and the power of it. So I don't think like open AI by itself is going to be the future of Gen AI. Gen AI, the future is in how it serves those specific platforms.
Can we get it to fix the autocorrect on my phone? That would be fantastic. Step one. Kristen, you and I are in similar industries. So what are your thoughts from a
I think I'd just add to what Adam said a little bit, because, if you think about traditionally the way predictive models were written, you had, the the data that you had to create the model, and then you had a holdout data set. And so you'd validate the model using these different pieces, and then you could use the model, right? In Gen AI, it's just not the way it works, right? The data is flowing through it, it's learning as it goes. And so you have to think of the whole way you structure your model evaluation and whether it's working or not differently, right? You've got to be very outcome focused, like Adam said. Weird answers will happen if your data has bias in it in the front end. So where you're looking and where you're testing and where you're making adjustments are a little different, and you have to have an expectation of the outcomes that you want, which is that expertise standpoint. You also have to have people who understand bias and what's kind of going in, and that was his earlier data point, right? So I think the real power of the tool is that anybody can use it, but it's also sort of the real challenge of the tool is that everyone can use it. And so if you roll it out without the right the right support for that, you can get weird outcomes. And there's been, really widely publicized things. There's a lawyer who used it to write a brief that was 100% made up, right? And rightly so, got in a lot of trouble for doing that because he didn't tell the model to not make stuff up, right? It will fill in the gaps if you don't tell it, and that's hallucination, right? You have to tell it, like, if you don't find it, don't just say I don't know, but if you don't know to do that, you get these answers. And so I think as we're rolling it out, the support of the right people and the right frameworks around it, so you try to reduce the bias and you have the right sort of review process of that outcomes, you set up that expectation of the outcome review, can really help you get better results and reduce the risk in some of your deployments.
100%. Those Gen AI models right now are very suggestive.
Yeah, I mean, you can search for Gen AI gone wrong, right, and get a lot of great examples of where it's gone wrong, really. Some funny, some a little sad. So
very true. And I think, not to tread into the privacy side, I think I will throw to Eduardo here in a second, but like one of the concerns that I always have is how are we handling the back propagation of the data into the model? So as we do more interesting things like answer questions as to, how much money's in my bank account, how do we segregate out those responses so that, Mike Schubert has $5 doesn't end up in this model that's now answering questions for Adam and others when they come and have similar needs. But tell us more, Eduardo. What warnings are? I'm assuming warnings from a privacy side, but what are you seeing from your chair at Carnival?
Yeah, mostly warnings. So when our message to employees is in the form of policy and some standards and procedures that supplement policy, but encouraging them that when engaging with generative AI tools, that they do so, just as we would maintain sort of a professionalism and confidentiality when communicating with external business partners or clients or non-employees, right? The same standards and policies apply to interactions with Gen AI tools, right? And I think that's a fundamental sort of foundational way that you can sort of encourage in a responsible way the use of and the exploration of such tools. So just as we wouldn't share, confidential or sensitive information with non-employee entities without appropriate, authorization, we must refrain from disclosing that information without that appropriate authorization. And so we wouldn't use, non-employee, created content without proper, due diligence and review. And so in that same regard, we must also refrain from just lifting and shifting, output that we get from generative AI tools and put that into some kind of work product without reviewing the created content, right? And so we just need to have a mindful focus on accuracy, quality, suitability, of that output. And that's sort of been our biggest, so taking into consideration the bias, right? Intellectual property rights, some of the misrepresentation that Kristen talked about. So we just need to really treat these tools as sort of non-employee kind of consultative advisors or partners, and then use that output, perhaps as guidance to to inform our decision making, but it shouldn't be regarded as sort of final.
And I think you touched on intellectual property in there, and I think that's one big warning as we work with vendors and you look at contracts and the actual product offerings that these vendors have. You need to put a legal lens on and determine what is happening to your company's data when you engage with these vendors, and who owns the resulting model. And this is one area I don't know that the legal teams across the country are all up to speed on looking at the language that's in the contracts that you enter into. But it's super important to understand whether the data coming out of your organization is enriching and emboldening a broader model that could be resold and potentially used by your competitors, or whether the resulting work is still the intellectual property of the company you work for, and that there's safeguards in place to preserve it. And I've seen both models to varying degrees, and I definitely have an opinion on which way my contracts need to be worded. But there are some use cases where you don't care. You're like, fine, we can enrich a broader model. There are others where it's your company's secret sauce, and you've got to protect that IP at all costs. We touched on talent a little bit there, and skills, and maybe Kristen, if I can throw it to you to tee off this one. We've seen a couple of questions come in from the audience even. What kind of talent considerations and contemplations are you and your leaders going through as you look to apply AI to achieve business goals? What types of skills are you looking for?
I think there's some new skills that people are talking about in terms of, you can talk about prompt engineers. I personally don't believe that's over the long term a full-time job. I think that's a skill set that people will have. I do think there's going to be a growing focus on the ethics side. So I think having, people focused on model ethics and the ethical use of this technology is going to be an increased focus. I'm sure a lot of companies already have people who are focused on compliance, but I think this will evolve a little bit more specifically to support the modeling. And then I think, like we've been talking about, some of just the pure data skills you have to have in here to actually, the data engineering, the data governance, the ability to make your data better, whether that's through vendors or however you're doing it, that is really, really important for the outcomes of these things. So everything related to the availability and curation and just production quality of your data is going to be an increasing focus, I think, for a lot of companies, because I think they'll find as they roll this out in some places, if you're new to this type of experience, you might not really have the data that you need, or the availability of the data, the quality of the data that you want to actually support some of these. So to me, those are really the three things that'll be a big focus for folks.
Adam, how about you? What are you looking for?
Great responses. Kristen stole a couple of them. So I'll go with data governance and cataloging as the main one. So I think a huge focus needs to be put on data cataloging and governance, and make sure you have the right data, not just for legacy AI models, but to be able to incorporate it into learning models that are being applied for generative AI. The other thing are app designers that could take something out of the box, like if you have an on-prem version of OpenAI, for example, what can we add to it to make it more relevant to what we're doing? And what can we add to it to make sure that users are using it effectively as well? And finally, the last thing and a very important thing is skilled AI generalists who can focus on training and enablement. So there are people going to use it, and a lot of people are going to use it ineffectively. But without the training and enablement piece, they will continue to use it or not use it as frequently when it could be a very powerful tool for their productivity. So you really need those people to encourage people to use it, give people the resources to use it correctly, and really understand what their best use cases are to make sure that they're not only enabled, but they continue to use the product and to enhance their productivity.
Super crisp, spot on. I 100% agree with all those. You and Kristen. Eduardo, what have they missed?
No, not much. I mean, just kind of tying it all together, I think that, it's, in some regards, it's kind of like privacy, right? Generally, people are just becoming more and more privacy aware. And, your role within an organization at some point probably will touch an element of privacy, just as it might, data governance or data retention or whatever it is. And so, although, you may work in an entirely different function like marketing or HR, you still should have some general awareness of AI, right? And we're going to see roles and responsibilities, dictate that, that's the case. And there's, I think, going to be an emphasis on people who have some kind of, ability to comment from an engineering perspective, to be able to articulate, how solutions uphold and respect information technology policies and governance policies and security policies. And so that's where I see, and along with what Kristen mentioned in the ethics space. So I think those are some key areas where AI skills are going to be very hot.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all of those. And the only thing that pops into my head, and it's not a skill, it's more of a behavior that I look for, is people that are curious. They have that learning mindset. They don't accept things for the way they've always been. They are looking to improve every process, every task, and every outcome. So just that learning mindset and that curiosity on top of all those skills seem to really go a long way to advancing the condition in the enterprise. So, shifting kind of back to, what we're seeing in terms of outcomes, and maybe Eduardo, I'll start with you. How are you seeing these applications apply to get better business insights or even observability into processes and outcomes in your company?
Yeah, I mean, so we as a privacy function, we offer, consultation, right, to the business, and we're sort of we're the checkers, right, not necessarily the doers. So in the case of privacy, we've tried to focus on how we might be able to use AI for some of that real-time monitoring that I talked about. But we work quite, collaboratively with our marketing function, who always has some innovative ways that they may use, that they're thinking about using AI. And I can't necessarily disclose, specific examples because a lot of that is proprietary right now. But I will say that the top learning has been just involving security and privacy early on in the process. We see, lots of times that, HR groups, marketing groups, I call those out, as some of the big ones, just because we work really closely with them. But it's happening in other areas like procurement, risk intelligence, risk management. But involving us early has been really key in helping, us help the business frame the discussion, in terms of, objective and what they would like to really accomplish, and really understand whether or not they need, whether or not AI is an appropriate solution, right? And so before we get too far down the path of, having discussions that, maybe putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, we should probably, understand from a privacy and security, perspective, what exactly the business is trying to accomplish, so that we can, provide guidance in real time, and they can perhaps adjust, whatever solution they're thinking about implementing. And so that's been my observation for better sort of business collaboration.
Awesome. Adam, from your seat with data visualization and all the work that you've accomplished, what how have you seen applications in AI for better insights and observability and ultimately those outcomes?
So I'll unmute myself. Great question, by the way. I think of this question as more of a future state of Gen AI, especially with data visualization. As these platforms, these data visualization platforms, are utilizing generative AI in their software, it's going to reduce the learning curve for a lot of people. So you'll be able to create easier calculations and parameters, and even create data visualizations within an application, which is exciting to many users. It enables them to get access to hopefully best practice when they're utilizing these tools, but to get started and lower the impact of that. The other thing too, I've noticed, I work with Tableau a lot, as mentioned earlier. So they have used AI for quite a long period of time, and they've iterated upon it for years for stuff like explain data and ask data, which helps people really understand their data. Again, if it's clean, catalog certified, to really get insights pretty quickly, where users could use natural language to communicate with the data sets in order to understand what's behind it. And it helps engage trust and helps people understand what they're working with a lot quicker. But again, it's important, as always mentioned, to make sure that it's always the data is in good shape for that. So if you use bad data with that, just like anything else, it's going to come back with really negative results and or confusing results.
For sure. It all starts with clean inputs, right?
Can't say that enough.
Right. Kristen, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at historically the use of some of the LLMs, a lot of it is to just gather, people are doing a lot of research. They had to read a lot of documents and sort of synthesize them. That's one very obvious use case, and one that's been well tested. Again, you might get weird answers, so you have to be careful. But I think for those functions, like we said, a compliance function, an audit function, a risk function, where they're going out and looking at different processes and trying to gather all this information, you could get a huge productivity lift just from leveraging AI in that context to help you gather the information and synthesize it. So a lot of things that are have big chunks of work that look like that, I think can get a lot faster. And I completely agree on how AI makes a lot of things more accessible to people, right? It just changes the skill set of your end user, which really, which is a really great thing, both in terms of, lifting their capabilities, but also in just freeing up their time to do more higher level things. And so I think there's a lot of great applications for it in a host of different ways, like the other folks have talked about. And it just, to me, when you're looking at it from an organization standpoint, it's just, what do you go after? Who do you enable? How do you actually get that going first, right? So you do it in a way that doesn't, risk compliance issues, privacy issues, customer issues, the front page headline issues, or miring yourself in detail where you don't do anything, where you talked, Mike, about FOMO, right? So.
Right. And I think, you touch on a few things there that are kind of the broader, bigger challenges inside organizations that have been questions over time, but they've been perhaps too complex for any one person or group to tackle. And, in our space and in like telecommunications, there's a large acquisition cost. And so you want to keep persistency, for example, of the people that you've acquired. And there's so many ways that people can become dissatisfied with a service spread across so many dimensions that when you think about it from a pure problem standpoint, it's hard to know where to begin. But the power of AI, the power of hopefully clean data, Adam, when you start to stitch that together and put more deep learning models on top of it, you can find patterns in there that would be hidden to a human, but a neural network or something like that, not to get too techy, but those types of things will start to expose correlations and outcomes to say, hey, Mike is at potential to leave because of some hidden factors. So I think having that curiosity and having that clean data and stitching it together and turning some of these more modern models loose on them can really lead to better outcomes for us. Well, I know we started this call talking about LLM. We'll end it talking about LLM, I think. Number of questions coming in from the group. It definitely was a centerpiece when we were all chatting, before. There's seriously a number of questions come in like, should we implement company-wide bans on Chat GPT? How can we advise on enterprise usage of Chat GPT? Is bias inherent in all AI? So I'll just package all those together and just kind of grab hold of whichever one you want to hug and respond to. And Kristen, I'll throw to you to.
Yeah, so maybe I'll kick off with the company-wide bans then. To me, that's the same as telling us we couldn't use spreadsheets when they first rolled in, right? AI is a tool. It's a new tool, right? And it's an extremely powerful tool. And when you roll those out, there's trade-offs and all those things, right? But I certainly as an actuary don't want to give up wouldn't have wanted to go my whole career without using Excel, right? Because somebody was worried about implementing this new technology, right? And so it's a tool. I think you have to figure out how to use it and how it's appropriate. A lot of companies banned the internet in their company when that first went live. I don't think anybody really does that anymore because that's a powerful tool as well. So I think we need to learn. I think we need to adapt. I think we need to have the right guardrails in place so you don't have accidental breaches and those sorts of things. And so maybe a temporary ban makes sense for your company because you haven't put the privacy restrictions or things in you need. But ultimately, I think it does not make sense. I think you will really miss out, and your enterprise needs to adopt this because people will be adopting, and it's just so powerful, and all your employees want to use it too. So it's going to be a talent issue for you if you have those type of bans that persist.
Yep. Eduardo, you want to reach in the grab bag?
Yeah, sure. I'll take it all. I mean, just like in support of what Kristen said, employees are going to use it anyway, regardless. Whether you block it or not, they'll just end up using it on their own machines and leveraging that content to enhance their productivity. So I think it's negligent to ban it, and I think that in some cases we should support it with the proper safeguards and controls, and encourage employees to discover ways that they may increase their productivity or generate ideas that could benefit the corporation as a whole. I mean, you do have to understand that these technologies have been trained on data that is resident out there in the internet, and that sometimes what's out there, as we all know, isn't 100% accurate, or in some cases, there's bias in that information, and so forth. And so, use it, but be careful to understand that it doesn't replace, an internet search engine, right? It isn't meant to replace your fact checking and your research. It's another tool, and you should, use it responsibly. And I would say that's the right way to approach it. And I think as you continue to mature as a company, your use of these technologies should stay in step with your strategic imperatives, and continue to enhance over time.
Awesome. Adam, parting thoughts?
Yes, there's a lot of good questions that popped up here. The one that wasn't really covered was bias. Anytime there's human intervention, there's going to be some sort of bias. So it could be conscious or subconscious, but you always have to vet the data and the responses from that AI. So for example, generative AI, you really need to vet those responses with an SME if you plan on sharing that. So those are things that you really need to consider. I know we're at time, so I'm not going to go much further. And the other thing about enterprise usage company bans of ChatGPT and other bots, the one thing you have to consider is the usage of data and the proprietary data. Because a lot of things when you're working with ChatGPT, if you don't have a contract in place with zero retention, that data is going to be out there. So you really have to consider that and what employees are using it for. So basically for any larger employers that are utilizing it, first you have to figure out a way to best mask the data before it goes in to ChatGPT or whatever LLM you're using. And secondly, you have to try to make sure that you have zero data retention, especially if you have a public company or a company that may push a lot of proprietary information through there. But until then, you should be able to use it, but you have to trust your employees that they're not going to be pushing proprietary information through these chatbots.
All right, we are at time. This was a super interesting topic. Lots of great insights from you all. I wrote a couple of things down I'm looking forward to contemplating later. Hopefully our audience did as well. Thanks again. That's it for our panel.
Thank you all for such a practical panel discussion, such great information there. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. As a reminder, please do check out the prizes and raffle rules section to see how you can earn points for the chance to win one of several prizes. And also please do visit our sponsors booth, as there's lots of good information, meet and greet opportunities there. Our next session will begin at 12:25 p.m. Eastern Time, and that will be a fireside chat presentation titled Driving Outstanding Business Transformation with Vertex. Please click the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected to the next session. We look forward to seeing you there.